Please be seated. I'm deeply saddened by the reports out of Charlottesville, Virginia this morning. The chaos was so intense there that friends of mine kept their daughter from returning to school until things quiet down. I want to start this morning with a quote from the New York Times. Former President Barack Obama responded to the violence in Charlottesville with a quote from Nelson Mandela. "No one is born hating another person because of the color of his skin, or his background, or his religion. They can learn to hate. And if they can learn to hate, they can be taught to love." I don't intend to make this a political sermon, not at least directly about the politics of our time. But never forget that Jesus was a political figure in his time. We can always apply the actions and teachings of the man we follow to our own actions in today's world 2,000 plus years later. That's why I've committed my life to following him. Do you remember your baptism vows? Do you put your whole trust in the grace and love of God? In the gospel this morning, we hear the familiar story of Jesus walking on water. I really wanted to have this be an interactive sermon with a kiddie pool, but couldn't figure out how to make that work. And certain members of the staff were not in favor. Surely walking on water is a miracle, but with Jesus, these kinds of things kept happening. After all, this miracle occurred only a few hours after Jesus fed 5,000 people with 5 loaves of bread and 2 fish, and no matter how people attempt to explain it, it's still a miracle. So in this stormy lake story, there is Jesus walking towards the bouncing boat filled with frightened men. The truly astonishing thing is that without overthinking it, Peter asks Jesus to command him to walk on the water, and Jesus calmly replies, "Come." Then Peter fearlessly steps out of the boat, some might say foolishly. He steps out of the boat, and it isn't until it occurs to him what he is doing and where he is that he begins to sink. Again, he cries out to Jesus, "Save me." And Jesus reaches out his hand immediately, and they step into the boat, and the storm is gone. Peter steps out of the boat to get to Jesus, not even thinking about the possibility of sinking. He knows Jesus, and he has experienced the power of his friend. As baptized Christians, we try to live with that kind of lens before us all the time. The understanding deep in our souls that we have put our whole trust in God's grace and love. That anything we do with God's help will have his enduring support. Peter wanted to step into the chaos of the stormy water. Peter felt a call to cross the raging waters, but frightened by the strength of the wind and his own frailty, he began to sink in fear. Even so, despite his going down, Peter was called to faith in the midst of the turmoil. Too often we feel that God is only in a gentle whisper. We mistakenly believe that we need to be quiet to listen for the small, still voice of God, neglecting the fact that God is equally present in the gale force of the wind. God is in the very midst of chaos. It's often in the most disorderly, confused times of our lives when we have let our guard down just enough to sense the true presence of God. Think about it. When have you done something that seemed so impossible, something so out of your own reach that you knew God was helping in some mystical way? This week, a young man was installing carpet in one of our offices. I was reminded that I knew him when he was a teenager many years ago. We were on a Christ Church mission trip to Mexico with a number of other youth from here and St. Peter's in Portchester. I didn't speak much Spanish, and I certainly didn't know my way around Juarez. But as one of the leaders, I was called to the responsibility of supervising this group of teenagers, stepping into chaos. It was chaos. I kept reminding myself that this was what God wanted me to do, and I was sure of that by the blessing I felt doing it. Then it was up to God to equip me with the abilities I needed for the work. Scripture tells us that with God all things are possible. And believe me, that's true. We had a remarkable time in Mexico. The kids, adults, and even I had a blast. We worked hard, but most importantly, I think we made a difference in the lives of the people we met, if only because we cared enough to step into the chaos that was their daily life. I know I was changed forever by the experience. I wouldn't have imagined I could do such a thing, but my confidence in God was what I relied on. Where are you called to step out in faith? What is God nudging you to do? Where is the chaos you experience? Can you offer your time at a soup kitchen, in a prison or a refugee center? For what you believe is right, even when it's not what your neighbor, your boss, or your family believe. Imagine what we might achieve if we stepped out of the boat, so to speak, knowing that we can't sink, that all we need to do is keep our eyes on Jesus and move forward, that no matter what a chaotic experience we are having, we can always say, Jesus, save me, and he will immediately.